We have two terrific poets with us today, Helena Cardona and Jeanette Clough. Award-winning poet, actor, and literary translator, Helena Cardona was born in Paris and raised all over Europe before settling in the U.S. She earned her M.A. in American literature from the Sorbonne, where she wrote her thesis on Henry James. She authored 3 poetry collections, including Life in Suspension, called A Vivid Self-Portrait as Scholar, Seer, and Muse by John Ashbery, and Dreaming My Animal Selves, described by David Mason as liminal, mystical, and otherworldly, and 5 translations. Her work has been translated into 16 languages. She appears as an actor in Chocolat, one of my favorite films, Red Notice, Ford v Ferrari, Star Trek Picard, The 100-Foot Journey, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Happy Feet 2, Serendipity, etc. An enchanting, illuminating, and uplifting poet, Helena Cardona.
Thank you so much, Harry, for this lovely introduction. And thank you so much, Jeanette, for reading together today. It's such a treat to be here, and Jennifer as well. And I'd like to say something before I start reading in terms of how, everything came together in my life, because I am both an actor and a poet. And I actually started doing both when I was 10. I wrote my first poems when I was 10, and we had a change in our school system for a week that year, where it became experimental, and I was able to choose I don't know what they called it at the time, drama and so I think those things are kind of markers in your life, and the poetry has stayed with me my whole life. The acting went away because I just returned to the regular school year and then academic year. And I think I always wanted to do it, but I was kind of in the system, in the academic system, which in France, I was born in Paris, which in France is selection through math. Scientific selection, and that's the royal door that opens, everything up. And since I could do it, I was good at everything. I just went into that mathematics, and physics and science section in high school, and straight into med school when I was 17. And then I had a breakdown and realized, oh no, I do want to do something else with my life. And since then, it's been a weaving of literature, of the arts, basically, both literature and acting. And so I did study literature, which for me was just a treat, because it was, reading books and writing about books. And then I also wanted to pursue acting. And for that, I moved to New York, which was my first home in the US. And now I've been in Los Angeles. So our paths are very unusual. And here I've been very lucky to be part of a wonderful community of poets and writers, as well as I found a great acting community. My first acting community, of course, was in New York, because that's where I went to drama school. And so that was a home. And then the Actors Studio was a home. And so my writing encompasses all of that, and I just was raised all over Europe. My dad was from Spain, my mom from Greece. We moved to Switzerland. And so I was raised as a child there before moving back to Paris for high school again, and lived in Germany. I lived in England, in Wales. I ended living in Spain, studying there and spending a lot of time with my grandparents. In Vienna when my dad was working for the UN there. So it's been, I for some people right away when they're children, they know what they want to do and it's almost a linear path. And for me, it's been the opposite of that. So, and for anyone whose path hasn't been linear, and all these detours in the end, I feel, have enriched me and enriched one's life. So I always look at it so I did not become a doctor in the traditional sense, because that system was not for me, but I ended training with shamans, and that has imbued my writing as well. And I look at the arts, poetry and acting, both as a way to transcend, everything, and to transmute pain into beauty and love and art. So I do think all the arts end coming together. There are many people who do more than one thing. Maybe it's writer and painter, but in the end, I think whatever you do in the arts is very healing, first for yourself and then for others. And so we, in our community, we are all part of this, and we share a gift. So I'm very, very honored to be here and to be sharing some of my poems with you. Another thing is that I do a lot of dream work. And so a lot of my poems also come from that. I mine my dreams. I do dream work as therapy, in terms of, finding answers to questions or issues that come up. And I also use, when I have the gift of having beautiful dreams, I also use them and mine them into poems. So I will read first from my collection, Life in Suspension, which is published by Salmon Poetry in Ireland. And it's actually a bilingual collection. So now I write in English, but French is my first language. Actually, English is my fifth. So it's my language of choice. It's become my language of choice. So I write in English, but then I translate the poems into French, and then they're one language on each page. And it becomes a dance between the languages. Then I revise the English and play with it. And because I'm my own translator, I also feel freer to maybe change a thing here or there. I'm also a literary translator, and I feel less. I feel like I really owe it to the original to be faithful to it as much as possible. So I'm going to start with a poem that is called Distant Drums. And one of the places that I love going to, and that I've been going to for what seems ever, more than 20 years, is Santa Fe, New Mexico. I just fell in love with the place. I first went there to do an acting workshop with a coach at the Actors Studio in New York. That's when I lived in New York. And I just fell in love with it. And I've been going back ever since. And so this I wrote after one of my many visits in New Mexico and Santa Fe in particular. It's called Distant Drums. In the sacred void, I inhabit the ancient part of my psyche, the wisdom, unbridled woman in rhythm with the amniotic tug of oceans, looks at the world instead of thinking, childlike, full of wonder, the mind a craftsman in need of emotional memory. There is nothing to do. I oscillate like grass in water, half fish through green-purple rays, flow with a river current, the heart raw, yet protected, love an absolute I cannot fight. Surrender all illusion. Let sheet music be blown by wind amid strawberries in bloom. And I'm going to read another poem from still from Life in Suspension. And this one is directly from a dream, and it's called Tricksters. There once lived a witch who possessed 2 stones. The first revealed whether a person or situation was beneficial. The second made you sleepy. She gave me the stone of unknowing and an appointment. But I discovered her ploy, for I saw the stone's spirit, as it too saw my spirit and offered me the choice to acquire its counterpart. So, when I encountered the lady again, I switched them, unbeknownst to her, and kept the stone of discerning for its gifts of protection and clarity. This poem, so I am also a yoga practitioner, and I just love doing yoga. It feels really, really good. I used to run a lot. I mean, I used to run like my whole life. And at one point, a chiropractor said to me that I shouldn't run so much. I should be careful, with years. And I've switched. I mean, I love going on walks and hikes and also, but I just love doing yoga. It's really great for the whole body. And so this poem came out of a yoga session. Shaft of light, smile behind the lips, my face a sunflower in a garden of trees, the eyes of the seagull open. Choose your beach, tears caught in the throat, stand in a mountain pose, breathe the flame of the ghost, a shift in reality. I dropped my mind, hanging in the void. A voice enters, shaft of light, God's finger in the shallows, consoling my inner weather. So this poem is what my life is about. It's called Winter Horse, because I was born in December. And it has an epigraph by Steven Spielberg. What kind of a horse? A miraculous kind of horse. I dream for a living, glimmer at the edge of life, a clock with many hands, shape-shifter, moving through different worlds. I sail on the endeavor, captain musician, not knowing whether I'm a ghost. I take the road to the end of the skyline. My mother blows directions in my ear from the other side. The spokes of the wheel loosen amidst thoughts like windstorms, containing all humanity. I manifest fulfilled in the land of shadows, resilient winter horse. So this is a pantoum, which is a poem that has a structure within it where 2 lines repeat every stanza in a different position. And like many poems in my collections, it's dedicated to my mother. Both my parents crossed over. Patience. Gratitude knocks at my door, melts the armor. My mother waits in the wild grass garden, broker of time and space, silent witness, allure like wind, billowing devotion. My mother waits in the wild grass garden, consults the universe, magnificent, silent witness, allure like wind, bellowing devotion, halo of white for body. Consulting the universe, magnificent. Memories waft in the tea-colored landscape, halo of white for body. Glide from the sweetness of joy. Memories waft in the tea-colored landscape, innovative, transform into wolves, glide from the sweetness of joy, find their pack, eccentric muzzles. Innovative, I transform into a wolf. Now horse merging into leopard, I find my pack, eccentric muzzle, leaping out into the world. Now horse merging into leopard, gratitude knocks at my door, melts the armor, leaping out into the world, broker of time and space. So I have a lot of animals in my books and in my poetry. I have this connection with animals, and I feel we're all one and connected to one another. So here's one. I went to Peru a few years ago, and it was really a magical trip. I just loved it. It was something very unusual happened there, and has stayed with me. Where I know it happens to a lot of people, so it's not unusual. But I went to Cusco, and I went to the Sacred Valley, and I went to I'm blanking on the name. The place where everybody goes, Machu Picchu. So on the way to Machu Picchu in the Sacred Valley, I started just seeing all these faces, everywhere in the trees and in the mountains, and that stayed with me. Like, very often I just see faces of animals in the trees, and in the tree in front of my where I live, and I feel like I receive a message each day from one. So this one has a French title, C'est comme ça, which is, it's like it is. C'est comme ça. Like a pelagic blue-footed booby flying through Patagonian rain shadow, I travel over the fire road to perch on the rock that bears my spirit. In Cusco, Peru, I hold sky in my hands, enter the mouth of the puma, between his teeth, into his head. Billions of stars vibrate, a rhythmic, timeless language. I hear my mother's voice echo, "You're all the sunlight that's ever been in my life." In my odyssey for a place to rest, I trust I'll find what I need. An ancient sea full of coral reefs, the promise of new beginnings, a sanctuary built by God, a spot just for us with wild geese and boundless reeds. How am I doing with time?
You have about 10, 11 minutes left.
Okay. And this is another poem dedicated to my mother. And it also came out of a dream. And it's called How God Thinks is Surprising. My mother and I are two swans intertwined. We show the world stage our connection, our closeness. The bond never fades. God is the director of the play. We're part of each other, a continuation of movement, dance, beauty. Together, we form a whole, a heart, an angel. Our core holds a plate to be filled with life. We create and celebrate every reason the symmetry of our truth, a vision, an offering. We invented time. The more we make it disappear, the closer to God we grow. I understand the nature of plants, living off the land and rain. I used to be a flower. I like morphing into an animal, devouring who I was. The earth never fails me. So another poem from this collection called A Mind Like Lightning, and that too came out of Santa Fe. And it has an epigraph by Hart Crane. Stars scribble in our eyes the frosty sagas, the glowing cantos of unvanquished space. A mind like lightning. Without gravity, I fly into 1,000 pieces, add sparkles to various reflections. Fallen stars, colliding lights, transform particles, waves, and dark matter. I become ocean, mercury, silver shimmers, fairy tales, fascinated. The strangeness of this atmosphere seduces, shifts consciousness, shapes bloodstreams, provokes a rush. Let the next dimension pull you, lightning mind, prosperous poet, dualist without a fight. Let the lake talk, embrace it. So I'm going to switch to my other collection, which is called Dreaming My Animal Selves. And this one directly came out of all the work I did with shamanic work I did with animals, and working with my dreams mostly. This one's called Cornucopia. Subtle feminine power creates a magnificent universe, rich soil, Edenic mythological birds and trees blooming in apotheosis. I travel corridors of mind, synapses of chaos, frenetic amnesia, beguiling impulses, diffusion of heaven, past marble portals to crystalline temples. Poseidon's laughter resonates. Hail the water dragon. With amethyst eyes, witness dashes of magic. Smiling crocodiles turn to tortoises. My name, Pyramid, antique amulet, the heart. A secret tower I inhabit. Across the web I've woven, I cut loose the end of sorrow. I'm here to stay. And here is another shamanic poem called Shaman in Residence. Halfway through the journey, she finds herself inside the whale, confined to mull her condition over. What led this far? What lies behind the baleen? What passageway to heed? Memories transpire on the edge of iodine, girl on a swing, deep blueness of lover's embrace, horses catching fish, till ocean expels her on the shore, diamond pane, weapon and jewel, sea glass licked by the sun. The way land greets her, she enters this sacred place called winter, elusive epiphany. With a different face, liquid language, she seeps into sand in search of treasures. And here's a love poem that is a combination of shamanic, a shamanic experience and love. And it's called Dreamer. Ah, to get a glimpse of Aphrodite and be touched by grace, see beauty everywhere, forgive all and myself, and surrender, surrender, surrender. Ah, to get another chance at love, for I worshipped Athena and followed Artemis. Taste the cypress pomegranate, dive into the ocean, have your heart broken. Consider this, be fortunate, grateful, consider this, be alive, for the greatest gift is given with death. There is no end and no beginning. Surrender, surrender, surrender. I pay with my mother's death for the price of my dreams, as I dream the world into being, as I dream new memories, as I dream myself into love, falling into you. Ah, to let Aphrodite guide you to the great spirit who proclaims again and again, mountains am I, rivers am I, wind, sand, and rain am I, moon, sun, and stars am I. Her voice will not be silenced, for it is formidable and echoes those of all beloved. It is her privilege to serve you, for life seeks beauty and complexity. Will you perceive with the eyes of the heart? Heed the call of jaguar and hummingbird? Let the wheel of time absorb you. Have your heart broken.
Well, thank you very much for your lovely, transformative, inclusive reading. You're a trusting poet. Another thing I like about your poetry, you're grateful. And are you a Jungian?
Yeah, I love Jung, and also I just think that I live a life with gratitude in general, and especially during the pandemic, which has been taxing for many of us. I just started having a gratitude journal daily, just to be grateful for, very basic things to begin with, and in general, all the good in my life. Because, when you've gone through really hard times, you get destabilized at times, and you have to remember you're here for a reason. You have your own path. There's ups and downs, and to keep trusting. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what I said earlier. I always see you're a trusting poet, and there's something new about your poetry. And I also like the way you seamlessly move from one part of the psyche to another, or the dream to the real life. And, it's rare in our time. Some people are afraid to go break boundaries. You're fearless in terms of, crossing a boundary. So it was really a wonderful reading, and it's just we're deeply gratified to have you back with us, Helena. So thank you for that marvelous reading. And
Thank you for having me.
No, you're great. I hope you come back.
Thank you. Yeah, pleasure.
I liked hearing about your life too. That was very revealing, and it led us more into your poetry. So thank you for letting us know about your upbringing and your studies and your journey. Our next poet is Jeanette Clough. Jeanette Clough's collection, Flourish, was a finalist in the Otis College of Art and Design and Eastern Washington University Blue Links book competitions. She is also author of Island, Red Hen, and other collections. Awards include Pushcart nominations, commendation in the Aesthetica Creative Works Competition UK, and residencies in Joshua Tree National Park and Ireland. A native of Paterson, New Jersey, she earned an MA from the University of Chicago and was an art librarian at the Getty Research Institute. Recent journal publications include the Colorado Review and Bellevue Literary Review. Jeanette has opened new worlds for us with her precision, intelligence, grace, and sharp perceptions. A brilliant poet, Jeanette Clough.
Thank you, Harry, for that wonderful introduction. And Hélène, your reading was visionary. I have an assortment of poems today. They're more experiential than I've been writing in the past, less abstract. And I don't know if that has come from being the COVID situation and in lockdown, just really having to face what's going on in the day-to-day world and climate change and so on. Well, the first one is sort of emerged from something that happened a long time ago. I think I was about 9, but it really didn't just sort of float up, until 2 years ago. It's called Artesian Spring. I remember how sunny the day was, driving from church in the back seat, me wearing a favorite fluffy blue floral dress. A special occasion. We're on our way to an artesian spring to fill big glass jugs with water gushing from its source. A treat, better than the Jersey tap. Under my feet, an empty jug. I look down and notice a ribbon of smoke snaking upward, and I say, "Daddy, something is burning on the floor." Kindled by the sun's heat, focused to one fine point through the glass. No flame yet, just a black oval smoldering on the carpet. We pull over and skid to a stop. He yanks me out, then the jug. Tosses dirt on the floor and joins us, 2 girls and a mother, well back and to the side. The parents are rattled. We wait. Nothing happens. He approaches the car cautiously and slides head first under the back end. The body is intact on both sides. He gets into the driver's seat. A pause. Then starts the car. Jars are relocated to the back of the station wagon and covered with blankets. My father says, "Thank you for speaking up." We continue to the spring where he takes my picture, dress streaming in the breeze. That came from a prompt poem. Well, it's a prompt poem, and the first line is from a poem called Confession by Leslie Ingram. Part of the first line. I've had migraines since my late teens, and maybe when I was a kid too, I just didn't know what they were. Recently, I added ocular migraines to my repertoire, and that was a first. So this is called Ocular Migraine. A glittery shape sparkles on the kitchen cabinet, rough spot, or a retina shedding bits of itself without regrowth. I close my eyes and still a scintillating clump of foil to the left. Then random bars of blue morph into a silver angled black hole where the iris should be. Behind the right lid, an undulating mix of green and yellow stalks ripples and twines as if water had dripped onto a chalk drawing. Both eyes closed, 2 scenes at once. Both open, utter blackness. Positive I am suddenly blind and this is all I'll ever see. A chimera of colored shapes whose motion only stops when my eyes open to an inky shade pulled over the world. For 10 long minutes, I rationalize, try to relax and enjoy the show, grateful for what I will have, sight reduced to abstract paintings. The zigzag necklace unhasps and angle by angle erases to the starting point. The scene on the right dissolves into the normal dark screen of a closed lid. No supple stalks of an underwater forest in the sun. Incomprehensible reprieve and distrust. I drive myself to the eye clinic, no appointment. You've described the classic ocular migraine, the retina specialist says. I have them too. He adds, there is no treatment. What if I'm driving, I ask. Just pull over, he says, until it is gone. Sometimes I wonder if I see things differently. I've had so many eye problems. Do not have depth perception. I can't see the 3D movies. Okay. This one is, I don't know, so unusual. I just picked all these experiential ones. For about a month, I was up at my sister's place in Northern California, and she has a flock of sheep. She was having some health problems, so for about a month, I looked after her sheep. So I guess the main characters in here are sheep, and an ewe is a female sheep. Investigation of possible crime scene. When the attack comes, no one is there. The ewe must have been terrified and made whatever cries sheep make when faced with a violent death. Not her regular baa or the low guttural bleat that calls her newborn lambs. Tufts of wool hang on the barbed wire behind the feeding trough. She turned, ran, went down twice, as witnessed by patterns left on flattened grass. More clumps on the border where she finally succumbed, unable to jump that last fence. The predator dragged her to ground and underneath the fence, leaving half her bones on each side, ribcage up. I count 11 mama sheep. There should be 12. Next day, the hired man and I walk opposite directions along the property line, looking for a carcass. He sees something down the slope. The skeleton is picked clean, probably by vultures. Mountain lion, he says. I picture the animal climbing an oak, landing softly in the brush, ravenous, wary. Dave agrees to gather the remains into a plastic garbage bag and dispose of them. When I walk by later, the site is mostly cleared, except for bits of fleece still caught on the twisted barbs. That experience just raised a lot of questions in me. You have to see the predator's point of view too. But alas, the sheep entered 2 little lambs. Well, the lambs were fine. They got adopted by other sheep. Territory. A young man, bleary and drunk, enters the motel's no-frills lobby and waits his turn. He explains to the clerk he needs a place to stay. This is his home. Then he takes the seat next to me in the cramped waiting room. Later that night, he sways across the parking lot, weeping. This is my grandmother's land, he sobs. This is where we lived, right here. She gave it to me Where else do I go? I could walk outside and say to him, let me buy you some food. You can sleep on the couch. Instead, I remained behind the thermal windows, cautious, suspended in the ordinary evil of letting things take their course, not wanting to get close, not wanting him in my room. When things quiet down, I go to the office and ask what happened to the man. The clerk sighs. I called social services, he says. He turns his head and looks outside, then adds, we took it from them. It's our fault. These next few are desert poems. As Harry mentioned in his intro, I was an artist in residence in Joshua Tree, and I stayed out in a former ranger station. And one section of this, which is a section that he and whoever, maybe he had a family, lived with, was on one side, and that's where I was. And then there are a couple attached rooms to the right. It's sort of like a big ranch strip with a veranda in front and then steps going down. Only, this is getting off track a little bit, but there was only solar heat from a really old system. So it was an experience. I had to go, I don't know, about 15 miles to get some water, drinking water. Okay, but anyway, next to me in one of those buildings, all sorts of people started turning up one morning. And usually nobody turned up. And they were here to do a tracking, they're there to do a tracking exercise. In other words, when people get lost in the desert, they send out a team to track where they may be. So they let me sit in on their seminar and even asked me to join in them. So I wrote a couple poems about that. I'm going to read one. I'll have to say that it emerged from the experience, but it's not a history of the experience. Tracking. Noon casts no shadow. We make our own on ground the color of pewter, raw silk, and curry. Your prints, ridged and unique, point north. This is the kind of thing I would do. Head for the road and go 90 degrees the other direction. On a bush, red evidence, and brittle orange in the dirt. Call us on your cell, promise to come back. You go beyond the place where you should stop. Your position transferred, florid, scented with juniper berries soaked in tequila. Our formations are wrong. We trample fragile shrubs, lose and find you again, parched, lacerated, burnt under a column of shade, all of which may be reversed. Night, our shadows sharp on bright snow. You are seated behind a rock we cannot yet see around, building a fire. It is we who come in need to you. I have a number of poems I call driving meditations. I like to drive. If I'm going to take a road trip, I like to stop and pull off on my way to where it is I'm going. This one is called Silver Reef, and it happens on the I-15 in Utah. Silver Reef. Everything has a crust. The crust sparkles, salt, thorns, a semi-precious sheen. I park my car under dry, translucent leaves, off the map, among the crystal trees. The interstate says Silver Reef, and I veer like ore to the magnet. The sky is lavender, and the rocks are Martian red. A pack of tumbleweeds does not touch the ground. My eyes are fooling me. The order in which things may have happened. Barking dogs across from my motel do not recognize me yet. I forget to watch the sunset. Tire rims litter the highway with rubber cuticle. I expect another scenic off-road vista. A sonic boom splits the heat, thunk of insects on the windshield, sandstone and silver, silver and red. Mining cars stenciled turquoise and gold balance on narrow gauge rails. The walk-in safe intact, 2 dry drinking fountains, small claws in the underbrush. The caretaker talks to herself and offers tap water. She likes to watch visitors put things together from the displays. I fall for the rocks and sky. I could sit in this breeze and drink free water night and day. A man hides his face, the lizard edge disturbed. I drive the one cul-de-sac road. On my way out the town stairs. A couple of short ones here. One's called Rain in the Desert. The other one's called Insects in the Desert. Sometimes just call it what they are. Rain in the Desert. A skyscape turns shades of slate with us driving under its lowering canopy. An abrupt downpour cuts channels into the hard-tacked ground. Rain that seldom survives the descent through parched air before it evaporates, instead drops its long needles onto an unflinching windshield that flicks them aside with wipers and speed. The other surprise is this rainbow over saltbrush and stubble, the end of its spectrum arc pacing the car as if to grant an indulgence, to mark this uncommon bounty in the dry place through which we pass. Insects in the Desert. 2 empty 5-gallon jugs, a decoy water dish kept outside for the bees that swarm my wet laundry, clinging like chainmail front to back, buzzing, drinking the fabric dry. I pick flies from the kitchen sink after washing my hair. Power surges, frequent and theatrical, disrupt the tiny moths. Later, I walk among the ghostly Joshua trees, fable-like, densely shadowed, disoriented at first. No illumination except a sky flocked with stars until, wingless and homing, I too am drawn to the sulfur yellow bulb over the veranda, the half-full glass sweating on my nightstand. And lastly, I'm going to read a few climate poems. There's a poem by Robert Frost you may have heard of, where it says, some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. So one of these is about ice, the other one's more about fire. I think we're sort of doing the planet end simultaneous with both methods. And hovering over Greenland, looking down at the ice sheet. Only the Arctic's is bigger. Greenland is farther south and melting faster. Old refrigerators defrost slowly. At first, wave after wave of heat barely makes a difference. Then more heat. It takes time for the ice to work loose in chunks, to become porous like a popsicle dissolving in your mouth until the whole thing collapses and fresh melt sluices into the pit of your stomach, which becomes fuller, like the ocean. What the planet may look like from the sky, smears of soot where the fires burned. Scattered across the landscape, miles of ashtrays with a litter of cigars, smoked by the wind, inhaling, exhaling cinders into the bone-dry, heat-blown air. Petroleum is an addiction. Then snow. Sparse flurries at first after the Gulf Stream collapses, which has happened before when glacial melt diluted the ocean. Warmth replaced by cold, iced for a millennium or so, until the sunken current corrects, when it can, if it can. We will panic, we will freeze, we may starve, we will adapt. We've done so before, eons ago. Ours is a smart planet. We may survive again, or else just the planet. This last one is a little more cheerful, but I think it is also addresses the climate. A piano has 88 keys, so that theme runs throughout. It's called A Story About Pianos. A sea of asphalt is marked with 88 parking spaces. In each space is a player piano. The pianos start automatically, but never together or with the same music. They play morning and night, rain or shine. No one is able to stop the pianos or park their cars. A fleet of bulldozers pushes the pianos together and drives over them until they stop playing. The pianos go elsewhere. The pianos string their 7 octaves 88 times across a field. Each speck of the field has a sound to play. Samba, hip-hop, jitterbug, waltzes, quadrilles, hula, clogging, and crumping. Composed from downpours, staccato hail, arpeggios of thunder, and the silence of lightning. The lovelorn sigh of ladybugs, a basso profundo chorus of roots, cricket's fluty trill, the squeak of sprouting seeds, moth dust, broken quail eggs, a ring of standing stones, loose feathers, tufts of fur, all of it played together, dawn through dawn. The field is plowed under, sold in sod chunks, or mowed, and soon can make almost no sound at all. The pianos go elsewhere. In the open sea, the pianos continually change direction. The player pianos crest a swell. Their piano wires split into currents, and keys become foam. A dozen baby grands smash against a massive rock, and the harps inside enter the throat of the sea. The sea breaks and heals, then breaks again. The pianos play constantly. Nothing stops them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette, for that wonderful reading. You have such a great range. At the beginning, you read those personal poems, A Family Journey. And then I love your poems, the Joshua Tree poems. Do you like the desert? I mean, when you get out into the desert, does that fascinate you?
I tend to relax, I think, because there's less stimulus going on. And when I was there in Joshua Tree, and pretty much unvisited, no internet, of course, and no TV, no radio, no nothing. Some weak solar batteries that only work during the day. So I had a battery lamp at night that I just carried around with me like my best friend. And it put a different rhythm in my life, but it was a very productive one. You have a tendency more to go to sleep when it gets dark and to wake up when it's light, for one thing. And there was no air conditioning. So this was in May, before it got really, really hot. But okay, you get used to it. Fans, but no air conditioning. The point is, I got into such a sort of a quiet place that I was able to concentrate much more than usual. And I was able to write about the things that were going on around me, no matter how small they were. Some of them were much more dreamlike. I didn't read those today, and others are a little more literal. So I found it a very productive time, and I've pulled on that. But I think the most of the poems where the desert is featured are probably in Joshua Tree. So the one in Utah is that also a pretty dry area.
I love your personal work and your poetry. You're always have such a precise use of language. Also, the work that you did and your own writing. At times, you're very scientific. You have a great way of looking at different objects on the landscape, and so I really enjoyed the personal. What is it within you that causes you to sit down or stand up, whatever you do when you write a poem? What causes you to focus on a poem? Is it emotional? Is it an idea? Is it a phrase? Is it an image?
Well, I have been writing not as much as I used to in the past, so that becomes a little harder to answer. Sometimes it's just straight, just when I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write something. And, you don't know. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Usually it has to do with some train of thought, often linked with an image, or at least associated with images, like the two looking at the planet from the sky poems. I had been looking at some paintings online, and they were abstract, but somehow to me they looked sort of like patterns you would see down on the ground if you'd had one of those, cameras way up high, or a satellite, or in an airplane, something like that. So that, just taking on that point of view of that image and what it reminded me of, sort of generated both of those poems. I rarely write from prompts, so I think this is the only prompt poem I've ever written that I thought was somewhat successful. So that's not normally where I get the inspiration from it, if it is indeed that. It is somehow things that happen during the day, but by the time they pass through my head, they come out sounding a little different, if not very different and odd.
Well, you mentioned air conditioning, none out there in the desert. We've all experienced the heat we're going through now, and it kind of lulls me out. But you two have really invigorated me and lifted me up, and it's really been an exalting reading. And we're almost out of time here. And Jennifer Clymer, she's going to come on, I know, and let me just thank you both before Jennifer speaks and closes the show. We have another show at 2, but thank you immensely, Jeanette and Helena. You two really have done magnificent work, and I know you'll continue. So thank you for your appearance today, and I'm sure somewhere down the line we would love to have you back. And here's our director, Jennifer Clymer.
Thank you.
Thank you both. It was wonderful to see you again. And I did want to share, some of our viewers reached out and said, wonderful reading. Thank you, Jeanette, Helena, Harry, and MPTF. And your work is luscious.
Oh. Thank you.
Thank you all. And yeah, again, anytime, please come back.
Pleasure.
Sure,
right.
Anytime.
Thank you. Harry, can you tease us with what's coming up next week?
Next week, we have 2 wonderful poets, D.A. Powell and Elena Corinna Byrne. So I'm looking forward to both of them. It'll be a wonderful reading.